You've said yes to one too many things, and now your calendar is overflowing. Your boss asks for one more favor. A friend needs a last-minute favor, and your family expects you to show up for yet another event. You feel the weight of every obligation pressing down, but saying no feels impossible. Why is it so hard to set boundaries, even when we know we're stretched too thin? Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, once wrote, "We must give ourselves the same care we give to others, for to neglect oneself is to lose the very foundation of all we do." What if saying no isn't selfish but a profound act of self-respect? Today, we're diving into the art of saying no without guilt, guided by the timeless wisdom of Stoicism. We'll explore how principles like self-control, detachment, and focusing on what's within our control can transform the way you approach boundaries. By the end of this video, you'll have practical tools to reframe your mindset, build emotional resilience, and reclaim your time and energy. Let's begin this journey toward empowerment and clarity. Stoicism offers a profound yet practical tool for navigating life's challenges, the dichotomy of control. At its core, this principle teaches us to focus solely on what we can control: our thoughts, actions, and responses, while letting go of what lies beyond our power. Epictetus, one of Stoicism's most influential teachers, put it simply: some things are within our control and some things are not. This distinction is the foundation of inner peace and clarity, especially when it comes to saying no without guilt. Think about it this way: when someone asks you for a favor or makes a demand, their request is outside your control. You can't dictate what others ask of you, but you can decide how to respond. That's where your power lies. Epictetus reminds us, freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. By accepting that external demands are not within your power to change, you free yourself from the weight of trying to please everyone or meet every expectation. Let's bring this into a modern context. Imagine a colleague asks you to take on an extra project, but it conflicts with your personal priorities. Maybe it's time with family, self-care, or another commitment. The request itself is outside your control, but your response is entirely yours to shape. Instead of feeling obligated to say yes, you can calmly decline, knowing that your decision aligns with what truly matters to you. This isn't selfish, it's self-aware. Stoicism teaches us to honor our boundaries without guilt because those boundaries are within our control. Now, take a moment to reflect. Can you recall a recent situation where you felt pressured to say yes, even when it didn't align with your priorities? How might applying the dichotomy of control have shifted your response? By focusing on what you can control, your choices and actions, you reclaim the freedom to live authentically without being swept away by external demands. This is the essence of saying no without guilt, recognizing the power you hold over your own life and exercising it with clarity and purpose. What if saying no isn't rejection but self-preservation? Think about that for a moment. Often we tie the word no to guilt, fear, or the idea that we're letting someone down. But what if we could shift that perspective entirely? This is where cognitive reframing comes into play, a powerful Stoic practice that helps us see things not as they are, but as we choose to interpret them. It's about taking control of our thoughts and reshaping them to serve our values, not our fears. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this and you will find strength. This idea is at the heart of cognitive reframing. When we say no, we're not rejecting someone else, we're affirming our own boundaries, priorities, and well-being. It's a declaration that our time, energy, and peace of mind are worth protecting. Let's take a practical example. Imagine a friend invites you to an event, but you're already stretched thin. Saying no might trigger guilt, that nagging feeling that you're disappointing them. But what if you reframed that guilt? Instead of seeing it as a failure to meet their expectations, you could view it as a sign that your priorities are out of alignment. The guilt isn't about them, it's about you trying to live up to an impossible standard of always being available. By saying no, you're not failing, you're realigning with what truly matters to you. Here's a challenge for you. Identify one area in your life where guilt creeps in when you say no. Maybe it's at work, with family, or among friends. Now reframe that guilt. See it not as a burden, but as a signal, a reminder that saying no is an act of self-respect. It's not about shutting others out. It's about creating space for what aligns with your values. This shift in perspective doesn't just reduce guilt, it empowers you. It transforms saying no from an act of reluctance into an act of strength. And that's the beauty of cognitive reframing. It doesn't change the situation, but it changes how you experience it. And when you experience it differently, you act differently, with clarity, confidence, and conviction. The Stoics believed that virtue was the highest good, the foundation of a life well lived. And at the heart of virtue were qualities like wisdom, courage, and self-discipline. These weren't just abstract ideals, they were practical tools for navigating life's challenges, including the art of saying no. Think about it. When we say yes to everything, we often dilute our focus and energy, spreading ourselves too thin. But when we say no, we're exercising wisdom by choosing what truly matters. As Seneca once said, if a man knows not to which port he sails, no wind is favorable. In other words, without clear boundaries, we drift aimlessly, pulled by every demand and distraction. Courage plays a role here too. It takes bravery to say no, especially when we fear disappointing others or being seen as uncooperative. But Stoicism teaches us that true courage isn't about avoiding discomfort, it's about standing firm in our values even when it's hard. Imagine you're at work and a colleague asks you to take on yet another project. You're already stretched thin, but you're tempted to say yes to avoid conflict. Here's where wisdom and courage intersect. Saying no isn't just about protecting your time. It's about respecting your limits and honoring your commitments to yourself. It's a declaration that your well-being matters. Let's take it a step further. Stoics believed in living in accordance with nature, which, in this context, means aligning our actions with our true priorities and values. Seneca put it beautifully: virtue is nothing else than right reason. When we say no, we're not being selfish or unkind. We're making rational choices that reflect what's important to us. It's about living authentically rather than bending to external pressures. So here's a question to reflect on. Where in your life are your current yeses pulling you away from what you truly value? Are you saying yes out of habit, fear, or a desire to please others? Or are your choices grounded in wisdom and aligned with your deepest principles? Setting boundaries isn't just about protecting your time, it's about living a life of integrity, where your actions reflect your values, and that, in the Stoic view, is the essence of virtue. Guilt often creeps in when we feel the weight of other people's expectations. It's that nagging fear of disappointing someone, of not living up to what they want from us. But here's the thing, Stoicism teaches us that this guilt isn't rooted in reality. It's rooted in our attachment to external validation. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic philosophers, put it best when he said, "If you wish to improve, be content to appear clueless or stupid in extraneous matters." In other words, seeking approval from others is a losing game. Their opinions are outside your control, and tying your sense of worth to them only leads to frustration and anxiety. Let's take a moment to think about this in a real-world context. Imagine you're invited to a social event, a party, a dinner, or maybe a work function. You're exhausted, maybe even a little overwhelmed, and deep down, you know saying yes would only stretch you thinner, but you hesitate. What will they think if you say no? Will they judge you? Will they stop inviting you? That hesitation, that fear of judgment, is what traps so many of us in the cycle of guilt. And yet, Stoicism reminds us that our integrity, our alignment with our own values and needs, matters far more than the fleeting opinions of others. So, here's a question to consider. How often do you say yes not because you truly want to, but because you're afraid of how others might perceive you? It's a tough question, but an important one. The truth is, every time we prioritize external approval over our own well-being, we're giving away a piece of our peace. The Stoic approach isn't about being indifferent to others. It's about recognizing that their judgments are beyond our control. What we can control is how we respond and whether we choose to act from a place of self-respect rather than fear. This detachment from external validation doesn't mean you stop caring about others altogether. It simply means you stop letting their opinions dictate your choices. When you start making decisions based on your own values and needs, you reclaim your power. You step into a space where guilt has no hold over you because you're no longer living for the approval of others. And that, in itself, is a profound act of self-respect. Imagine this: you're asked to take on yet another commitment, and even though you're already stretched thin, the thought of saying no fills you with dread. What if they're disappointed? What if they think less of you? This is where the Stoic practice of Premeditatio Malorum, or the Premeditation of Evils, comes in. At its core, it's about anticipating challenges, not to dwell on them, but to prepare for them with clarity and calm. As Seneca once wrote, "What is quite unlooked for is more crushing in its effect, and unexpectedness adds to the weight of a disaster." By imagining the worst-case scenarios beforehand, we strip them of their power to shock or overwhelm us. Let's take this idea into a real-world situation. Picture yourself needing to decline a request from a close friend or colleague. Instead of avoiding the conversation, you mentally rehearse it. You imagine their possible reactions. Maybe they'll be upset, maybe they'll push back, and you prepare your response. You remind yourself that saying no isn't a rejection of them as a person. It's simply a boundary you're setting for your own well-being. By practicing this mental rehearsal, you're not only preparing for the conversation, but also reducing the fear and guilt that often accompany it. Now, here's where it gets personal. Think about a situation in your own life where you've struggled to say no. Maybe it's a request from a family member, a coworker, or even yourself. Those moments when you've overcommitted because you didn't want to disappoint anyone. Take a moment to apply Premeditatio Malorum to that scenario. Imagine how you'd say no, what the other person might say in response, and how you'd stay grounded in your decision. This exercise isn't about predicting the future perfectly. It's about building emotional resilience so that when the time comes, you can act with confidence and clarity. By embracing this Stoic practice, you're not just preparing for a single conversation. You're training yourself to face life's challenges with a steadier mind and a stronger sense of purpose. And as you do, you'll find that saying no becomes less about guilt and more about honoring your own values and priorities. Growth begins where comfort ends. It's a truth that might feel counterintuitive at first, but it's one that Stoicism has long embraced as a cornerstone of resilience and personal development. Marcus Aurelius, one of the great Stoic philosophers, once said, "What stands in the way becomes the way." In other words, the very challenges we face, the discomforts, the hardships, are the very things that shape us, that teach us how to endure, adapt, and ultimately thrive. Think about it. When was the last time you grew as a person while staying completely within your comfort zone? It's unlikely. Growth happens when we're stretched, when we're forced to confront things that feel difficult or even painful. And this is where saying no becomes a powerful tool. imagine saying no to a toxic relationship that drains your energy or to a habit that no longer serves you. It's not easy, it might even feel uncomfortable at first, but it's in that discomfort that you begin to reclaim your strength, your boundaries, and your sense of self. Stoicism teaches us that discomfort isn't something to avoid, it's something to lean into. Why? Because it's in those moments of unease that we build resilience. We learn to sit with our discomfort, to understand it, and to use it as fuel for growth. So take a moment to reflect. Where in your life are you avoiding discomfort? Is there a situation, a relationship, or a habit that you've been saying yes to out of fear of the unknown? What would happen if you said no instead? This isn't about seeking out pain for its own sake, but about recognizing that discomfort is often a signpost pointing us toward growth. When you say no to something that no longer aligns with your values or well-being, you're not just setting a boundary, you're creating space for something better. You're choosing to grow even if it feels hard in the moment. So, what's one area in your life where you can lean into discomfort today? Start small, but start. Because every step you take outside your comfort zone is a step toward becoming stronger, wiser, and more resilient. How often do we say yes to things simply because we're unsure of what truly matters to us? It's a question worth sitting with for a moment. Stoicism teaches us that clarity in thought is the foundation of purposeful action. Without it, we risk being pulled in countless directions, sacrificing our peace of mind for the sake of others' expectations. As Epictetus once said, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. This isn't just advice, it's a call to align our actions with our deepest values. Clear judgment, as Epictetus reminds us, is the key to living a life of integrity and intention. Imagine this scenario. A colleague asks you to take on an extra project, but you're already stretched thin. Without clarity about your priorities, you might feel pressured to say yes, even if it means sacrificing your well-being. But what if instead you paused and asked yourself, does this align with what I truly value? Setting a clear boundary, whether it's with a colleague, a friend, or even a family member, starts with knowing what you're willing to give and what you need to protect. It's not about being selfish, it's about being honest. Take a moment to reflect. Where in your life could greater clarity help you say no with confidence? Maybe it's in your work, your relationships, or even how you spend your free time. When you're clear about your priorities, saying no becomes less about guilt and more about staying true to yourself. It's a practice, not a one-time decision, a skill that grows stronger with each thoughtful choice you make. Saying no isn't just about refusing, it's about reclaiming your time and energy for what truly matters. Think about it. Every time you say yes to something, you're implicitly saying no to something else. The Stoics understood this deeply. They believed that life is short and our time is precious. Seneca once wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." This isn't a call to panic, but a reminder to be intentional. Prioritization isn't just a skill, it's a way of living with purpose. So, how do we decide what deserves our yes and what should get a firm no? The Stoics would tell you to start by identifying your core values and long-term goals. What aligns with your sense of purpose? What brings you closer to becoming the person you want to be? When you're clear on these, saying no becomes less about guilt and more about staying true to yourself. For example, imagine being asked to take on a low-priority task at work, one that doesn't align with your goals or contribute to your growth. Saying no to that request frees you up to focus on a passion project or a meaningful responsibility that genuinely moves the needle in your life. Here's a simple exercise. Grab a piece of paper and write down your top 3 priorities right now. What are the things that matter most to you, whether it's your family, your career, your health, or a personal passion? Once you've got that list, ask yourself, how often are you saying yes to things that pull you away from these priorities? Saying no isn't selfish, it's a way of protecting what you value most. It's about making room for the meaningful rather than letting the trivial take over. The Stoics remind us that time is our most finite resource. Every no you say is a step toward honoring that truth. So the next time you're faced with a decision, pause and ask yourself, does this align with my values? Will this bring me closer to my long-term goals? If the answer is no, then saying no isn't just okay, it's essential. At the heart of saying no without guilt lies a crucial, yet often overlooked ingredient: self-compassion. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that prioritizing yourself is selfish, but the truth is, it's not. Self-compassion is a vital act of self-preservation, a way to honor your limits and protect your well-being. And here's the beautiful thing: Stoicism, often seen as a philosophy of toughness, actually champions this idea. The Stoics believed that living virtuously includes treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding you extend to others. Marcus Aurelius, one of Stoicism's greatest voices, put it this way: be tolerant with others and strict with yourself. But what's often missed in that statement is the balance it implies. Being strict with yourself doesn't mean being harsh or unforgiving. It means holding yourself accountable while also recognizing your humanity, your flaws, your limits, and your need for rest. It's about acknowledging that you, just like everyone else, are a work in progress. Think about the last time you said yes when you really wanted to say no. Maybe it led to stress, exhaustion, or even resentment. It's easy to beat yourself up for those moments, to dwell on what you should have done differently. But self-compassion asks you to forgive yourself. It reminds you that every yes in the past was a step in your growth, a moment of learning. Maybe you didn't know your limits then, but you do now. And that's progress. So how can you bring self-compassion into the act of saying no? Start by reframing it. Instead of seeing it as a rejection of others, see it as an affirmation of yourself, your time, your energy, your peace. When you say no, you're not being unkind, you're being honest. You're setting boundaries that allow you to show up fully for the things that truly matter. Take a moment to reflect. What would it feel like to treat yourself with the same care you give to others? How might that shift the way you approach saying no? Because when you nurture self-compassion, you're not just saying no to others, you're saying yes to a healthier, more balanced version of yourself. And that, in the Stoic view, is a virtuous act. Fear of conflict is one of the most common reasons we say yes when we really want to say no. It's that nagging worry about upsetting someone, sparking an argument, or being seen as difficult. But here's the thing: Stoicism teaches us that fear, especially the fear of conflict, is something we can face head-on with courage and reason. It's not about avoiding discomfort, it's about embracing it as an opportunity to grow. As Epictetus once said, it's not what happens to you but how you react to it that matters. That's the Stoic mindset. Fear doesn't control you, your rational thought does. Think about the last time you avoided saying no because you were afraid of how someone might react. Maybe it was a friend asking for a favor you didn't have time for, or a coworker pushing you to take on extra work. The fear of conflict can feel paralyzing, but Stoicism reminds us that we have the tools to navigate these moments with calm and clarity. Imagine having a difficult conversation where, instead of shrinking back, you stand firm, speak honestly, and listen with empathy. That's the power of applying Stoic principles. You don't have to let fear dictate your actions. Here's an example. Let's say a colleague asks you to take on a project you're already overwhelmed with. Instead of saying yes to avoid conflict, you pause, take a breath, and respond with something like, I understand this is important, but I'm currently focused on other priorities. Let's figure out how to handle this together. This approach isn't about shutting the other person down. It's about setting boundaries with respect and reason. It's a way to honor your own needs while still engaging thoughtfully with others. Now, take a moment to reflect. What's one fear that holds you back from saying no? Is it the fear of disappointing someone, the fear of confrontation? Whatever it is, know that you're not alone, and that overcoming this fear starts with small, intentional steps. The next time you feel that hesitation, remind yourself that saying no isn't selfish, it's an act of self-respect. And with each no you say, you'll find it gets a little easier to stand firm in your decisions. After all, courage isn't the absence of fear, it's moving forward despite it. How much of your time is truly yours? Think about it. How often do you find yourself caught in obligations, distractions, or commitments that drain your energy without adding value to your life? Stoicism teaches us that time is our most precious resource, far more valuable than money, status, or material possessions. Why? Because time once spent can never be reclaimed. Seneca, the great Stoic philosopher, put it this way: "You are living as if destined to live forever. Your own frailty never occurs to you. You waste time as if you drew from a full and abundant supply, though all the while that day which you bestow on some person or thing is perhaps your last." This isn't just a poetic observation, it's a wake-up call. Every moment we give away to things that don't align with our values or goals is a moment we'll never get back. Imagine saying yes to every request that comes your way, staying late at work for tasks that aren't yours, attending events you don't enjoy, or scrolling through endless social media feeds. These yeses add up, leaving little room for what truly matters: your growth, your relationships, your purpose. But here's where the power of saying no comes in. By saying no to time-wasting activities, you're not being selfish, you're being intentional. You're choosing to guard your time like the finite, irreplaceable resource it is. For instance, picture a colleague asking you to take on an extra project that doesn't align with your priorities. Saying no in this moment isn't just about setting boundaries, it's about honoring your commitment to your own goals and values. It's about recognizing that your time is too valuable to be squandered on things that don't serve you. Now take a moment to reflect. Where in your life are you giving away your time without a second thought? What activities or commitments could you say no to so you can say yes to what truly matters? Reclaiming your time starts with small, deliberate choices that align with the Stoic principle of living intentionally. Because in the end, it's not about how much time you have, it's about how you use it. And every no you say is a step toward a life that's richer, more meaningful, and truly your own. Picture this: you're scrolling through your phone, and an invitation pops up for an event you're not really interested in. You feel that familiar tug of obligation, that little voice whispering, "You should say yes. What if they think you're rude?" But what if, instead of defaulting to yes, you paused and asked yourself a simple yet profound question: is this how I want to spend my limited time? This is where the Stoic practice of Memento Mori comes into play. Memento Mori is Latin for "remember you must die." It's not meant to be morbid or depressing. It's a powerful reminder of life's brevity and the urgency to live authentically. Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers, once wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." This idea isn't about fear, it's about clarity. When we truly grasp that our time is finite, we stop wasting it on things that don't align with our values or goals. Let's bring this to life with an example. Imagine you've been invited to a social gathering, but you've been working on a passion project that truly lights you up. Instead of feeling guilty about saying no, you remind yourself of Memento Mori. you realize that every yes to something unimportant is a no to what truly matters. So you politely decline the invitation and spend the evening immersed in your project, knowing you're honoring your time and purpose. This practice isn't about rejecting all social connections or becoming isolated. It's about being intentional with your choices. Memento Mori helps you cut through the noise of distractions and obligations, guiding you to focus on what's meaningful. It's a tool for reclaiming your time and energy so you can live a life that feels true to you. Now take a moment to reflect. What distractions or obligations are currently pulling you away from what truly matters? How might the reminder of life's fleeting nature help you say no more confidently? The beauty of Memento Mori is that it doesn't just apply to big decisions. It can transform the small, everyday choices that shape the direction of your life. By embracing this Stoic practice, you're not just saying no to others, you're saying yes to yourself, to your values, and to the life you want to create. And that's a decision you'll never regret. Gratitude has a unique way of reshaping how we see the world and how we see ourselves when we say no. When we pause to appreciate what we already have, it becomes easier to recognize that declining a request isn't a loss or a failure. Instead, it's an act of honoring our boundaries and valuing what's already in our lives. The Stoics understood this deeply. They believed that true contentment comes not from endlessly chasing what we lack, but from fully embracing and appreciating what we already possess. Epictetus, one of Stoicism's most influential thinkers, once said, "He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has." This simple yet profound idea reminds us that gratitude isn't just a feel-good emotion, it's a practice, a way of grounding ourselves in the present moment. When we focus on what we're grateful for, the weight of guilt begins to lift. Saying no longer feels like a rejection of others. It becomes an affirmation of what we already hold dear. Let's take a practical example. Imagine a friend asks you to help them move on a weekend when you've already committed to spending time with your family. Instead of feeling guilty for declining, you might respond with gratitude. "I'm so honored you thought of me for this, and I truly wish I could help. Right now, I've made a commitment to my family, and I'm grateful for this time with them." By framing your response in gratitude, you acknowledge the value of the request while also honoring your own priorities. It's not about shutting someone down, it's about elevating what matters most to you in that moment. So how might gratitude ease your own feelings of guilt when saying no? What are the things in your life, your time, your energy, your relationships that you're truly grateful for? When you focus on those, saying no becomes less about what you're turning down and more about what you're choosing to protect and cherish. Gratitude, in this way, isn't just a shield against guilt. It's a compass guiding you toward a life that feels balanced and true to who you are. Have you ever stopped to ask yourself, are your yeses obligations or are they choices? It's easy to fall into the trap of believing that we have to do certain things, attend that event, take on that extra project, or say yes to that favor. But Stoicism invites us to pause and reconsider. At its core, Stoic philosophy teaches us that while we can't always control what happens to us, we can control how we respond. And that includes how we decide to spend our time and energy. As Seneca once wrote, the greatest obstacle to living is expectancy, which hangs upon tomorrow and loses today. You are arranging what lies in fortune's control and abandoning what lies in yours. In other words, we often give away our agency by focusing on what we think we must do rather than what we choose to do. Let's take a common scenario. Maybe you've agreed to host a family gathering because you feel it's expected of you. It's not something you particularly want to do, but you tell yourself it's an obligation. Here's where Stoicism offers a powerful reframe. Instead of seeing it as something you have to do, you can choose to see it as something you get to do. Maybe it's an opportunity to connect with loved ones, to practice generosity, or to strengthen relationships. When you shift your perspective, what felt like a burden can become a meaningful choice, one that aligns with your values. So here's a challenge for you. Think of one area in your life where you've been operating on autopilot, defaulting to yes out of habit or obligation. Now ask yourself, how can I reclaim my agency here? How can I reframe this as a choice rather than something I'm forced into? It's not about rejecting responsibility or shirking commitments. It's about recognizing that even in the busiest, most demanding moments, you still have the power to decide how you approach them. And that small shift in mindset, it's where true freedom begins. Silence can be one of the most powerful ways to say no. It's not just the absence of words, it's a deliberate choice, a form of restraint that speaks volumes. In Stoic philosophy, thoughtful silence is often seen as a mark of wisdom and self-control. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this and you will find strength. Silence, in this sense, is a way to reclaim that power, to step back from the noise and demands of the world and focus on what truly matters to you. Imagine this scenario. A colleague asks you to take on an extra project, one that you simply don't have the time or energy for. Instead of immediately trying to explain yourself or justify your decision, you pause. You let the silence hang for just a moment, and then you calmly say, "I can't take this on right now." No lengthy excuses, no over-explaining, just clarity and quiet confidence. That silence before your response sends a message. You've thought about it and your decision is firm. This approach isn't about being dismissive or rude. It's about honoring your boundaries and respecting your own limits. Silence can act as a shield, protecting you from the pressure to overcommit or say yes when you really mean no. It gives you the space to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. So, how can you start using silence to assert your boundaries? The next time you're faced with a request that doesn't align with your priorities, try this. Take a breath, let the silence settle, and then respond with intention. Notice how it feels to stand firm without over-explaining. Silence, when used wisely, isn't just a lack of words, it's a statement of strength. Now, let's talk about one of the most powerful tools the Stoics used to gain clarity and strengthen their resolve: journaling. It might seem simple, but the act of writing down your thoughts is more than just putting pen to paper. It's a way to untangle the noise in your mind and see your decisions with fresh eyes. Seneca, one of the great Stoic philosophers, once wrote, "You should be examining yourself every day. What did I avoid today? What did I resist? What did I improve?" That daily reflection wasn't just a habit. It was a way to live intentionally, to make sure his actions aligned with his values. Journaling is especially helpful when it comes to saying no. Think about it. How often do you find yourself torn between what you should do and what you want to do? Or maybe you feel pressured to say yes, even when your gut is telling you no. Writing it down helps you step back and see the bigger picture. For example, imagine you're asked to take on a project that you know will stretch you too thin. Instead of immediately agreeing out of guilt or obligation, you could journal about it. Ask yourself, does this align with my priorities? What will I have to sacrifice if I say yes? What would it feel like to say no? By putting these thoughts on paper, you create space to make a decision that's rooted in clarity, not emotion. And here's the thing, you don't need to write pages and pages. Even just a few sentences can make a difference. Start by reflecting on your day, like Seneca suggested. What went well? What felt off? Where did you struggle to set boundaries? Over time, you'll start to notice patterns, moments where you felt empowered by saying no, and moments where you wish you had. This self-awareness is the foundation of Stoic wisdom, and it's something you can build through journaling. So why not give it a try? Grab a notebook or even open a note on your phone and spend a few minutes at the end of your day reflecting. Think about a situation where you're struggling to say no and write down your thoughts. What's holding you back? What would it look like to approach it with courage and clarity? The more you practice, the easier it becomes to see where your boundaries lie and to honor them without guilt. Humility plays a quiet but powerful role in the art of saying no. It's the voice that reminds us we're human with limits and boundaries, and that's perfectly okay. The Stoics held humility in high regard, not as a weakness but as a virtue, a way to align ourselves with reality. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic thinkers, put it simply: know first who you are and then adorn yourself accordingly. In other words, understanding your capacities is the foundation of wisdom. It's not about shrinking yourself, it's about stepping into clarity. Imagine you're asked to take on a project that's far beyond your current skill set or available time. Humility allows you to acknowledge without shame or guilt that this isn't something you can do well or at all. Maybe it's a colleague asking for help with a task you're not qualified for, or a friend inviting you to an event when you're already stretched thin. Humility helps you say, "I can't do this justice," or "I don't have the capacity right now," without fearing judgment or feeling like you failed. It's about honoring your limits not as flaws but as truths. Take a moment to reflect on your own life. Are there situations where humility could guide your response? Where saying no isn't about shutting doors but about staying true to what you can realistically handle? Humility doesn't just protect your time and energy, it also respects the other person's needs by ensuring they find the right person or solution, rather than relying on someone who's overstretched. It's a quiet strength, one that fosters trust and authenticity in every interaction. How often do external pressures dictate your choices? Whether it's a friend insisting you join a social event you're not interested in, a workplace culture pushing you to overcommit, or even societal trends nudging you to conform, these external forces can feel overwhelming. Stoicism offers a powerful antidote to this kind of pressure. It teaches us to focus on what we can control: our own thoughts, actions, and values, while letting go of what lies outside our influence. Marcus Aurelius, one of history's most celebrated Stoic philosophers, once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." What he's pointing to here is the idea that your inner peace is far more valuable than chasing external approval. When you base your decisions on what others expect of you, you give away your power. But when you align your choices with your core values, you reclaim it. Let's take a real-world example. Imagine a friend invites you to a trendy event that everyone seems to be raving about, but deep down, you know it's not something you'd enjoy. Instead of saying yes out of fear of missing out or worrying what others might think, you politely decline. That simple act of saying no isn't just about skipping an event. It's a declaration that your time and energy are yours to spend as you see fit. It's a quiet but powerful way to honor your own needs and values. Now think about your own life. What's one external pressure you've been feeling lately? Is it the urge to keep up with a trend that doesn't resonate with you? Or maybe it's the expectation to always be available even when it drains you. Take a moment to identify it, then ask yourself, does this align with what truly matters to me? If the answer is no, consider how you might set a boundary, not out of defiance but out of self-respect. Stoicism isn't about isolating yourself or rejecting everything around you. It's about making conscious, intentional choices that reflect your values, even when the world around you pulls in a different direction. By practicing this kind of discernment, you not only protect your peace, but also cultivate a deeper sense of authenticity in your life. One of the most powerful tools the Stoics left us is the practice of daily reflection. It's not just about looking back on your day. It's about actively learning from it. Each evening, the Stoics set aside time to review their decisions, their actions, and even their thoughts. This wasn't about dwelling on mistakes or patting themselves on the back. It was about growth. Seneca put it beautifully when he said, "Assess each day as if it were a life." Imagine that, treating each day as its own complete story, with lessons to carry forward into the next. So, how does this apply to saying no? Reflection gives you the chance to evaluate your yeses and nos. Did you say yes to something out of obligation, only to feel drained afterward? Did you say no to an opportunity out of fear, and now wonder if you missed out? These moments are gold. They're where the learning happens. By reviewing your choices, you start to see patterns, what aligns with your values and what doesn't. And with that clarity, you can make better decisions tomorrow. Let's take an example. Suppose you said yes to helping a friend move, even though you were exhausted and had other commitments. During your evening reflection, you might realize that while your intention was kind, the cost to your own well-being was high. Or maybe you said no to a social event because you needed time to recharge, and upon reflection, you feel confident that it was the right call. These small, honest assessments help you refine your boundaries and strengthen your ability to say no without guilt. Now, here's the challenge: commit to this practice. Just 5 minutes at the end of your day can make a world of difference. Find a quiet moment, grab a journal, and ask yourself 2 simple questions. What did I say yes to today, and why? What did I say no to today, and why? Over time, you'll notice how this small habit transforms not just your decisions, but your confidence in making them. It's not about being perfect, it's about being intentional, and that's where real growth begins. As we wrap up, let's take a moment to reflect on the Stoic tools we've explored today. At the heart of saying no without guilt is the dichotomy of control, a principle that reminds us to focus only on what we can influence and let go of what we can't. When we say no, we're not rejecting others, we're honoring our boundaries and aligning our actions with our values. It's a practice of clarity, not selfishness. Cognitive reframing plays a pivotal role here. By shifting how we think about saying no, we transform it from an act of guilt to an act of self-respect. Instead of seeing it as a failure to please others, we recognize it as a commitment to our own well-being and priorities. And let's not forget the importance of self-compassion. Saying no isn't about being harsh or rigid. It's about treating ourselves with the same kindness we so often extend to others. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good person should be." Be one. This is the essence of living authentically. When we say no with intention and integrity, we're not just setting boundaries, we're living in alignment with who we truly are. It's a step toward personal growth, a way to reclaim our time, energy, and peace of mind. So, as you leave today, I encourage you to practice saying no without guilt. Start small, perhaps with a request that feels manageable, and notice how it feels to prioritize your needs. And remember, this isn't about perfection, it's about progress. If you found value in these Stoic principles, I'd love to hear how you're applying them in your life. Share your experiences in the comments below, and if you're hungry for more Stoic wisdom, consider subscribing for more guidance on living with clarity, courage, and purpose. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Here's to saying no with confidence and living a life that truly reflects your values.